All right, let's jump into the paternity leave debate. Now, to even get into this, I think it's important to mention that the recent hubbub about Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg's paternity leave, it's not even necessarily about paternity leave. There's a homophobic aspect of this, which is the feminization of a gay man like Pete Buttigieg taking paternity leave, which really should be for moms. It's really for women. Has he been learning how to breastfeed? Tucker Carlson said, feminizing a gay man. So there's a homophobic aspect to it. That's one piece of it. There's another piece of it, which for some people, it's just political opportunism, which is under Trump, the Republicans weren't blaming Trump for the supply shortages that we had early during the pandemic. Under Trump, Republicans weren't blaming Trump's Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao. Now, those very same Republicans are blaming Joe Biden and blaming Pete Buttigieg. So for some, it's political opportunism. But then there's also an aspect of this which kind of feels more psychological, either like my dad wasn't around when I was little, so nobody should get paternity leave, kind of like if I can't play in the sandbox, I'm going to poop in it and shut the whole thing down. Or also kind of a antiquated tropes of it being feminine to take time off when you've had a kid, right? So there's a lot of different motivations for different people. The latest is Joe Rogan weighing in on this during an interview he did with Bridget Fetassi. I'm not exactly sure how her last name is pronounced. I believe she's a comedian. And again, they get into this issue of Pete Buttigieg's paternity leave. Let's take a listen and then we'll discuss.
And it's what's crazy is that Pete Buttigieg during this whole time is on paternity leave. And
so what they mean is during the supply shortages that we're having. This entire time, Pete Buttigieg is on paternity leave.
I want to go, listen, man, I understand it's hard to raise a child, but isn't that supposed to be for the person who gave birth?
It's crazy. Yeah, you're right. Now over 70 ships containing 500,000 containers are waiting offshore.
500,000.
But he was saying that.
Now, those ships, Pete Buttigieg doesn't control those ships. Pete Buttigieg is one guy. It's a country of 330 million people. Even if you believe that it's the Department of Transportation that controls those ships, there's a deputy secretary of transportation and an undersecretary of transportation. The idea that it's because Pete is holding a baby instead of a phone, even though he's actually been participating in meetings anyway, the ships are stuck. It's such a silly, childish idea.
It's like this negative feedback loop that is rapidly cycling out of control that if it continues unabated will destroy the global economy. I'm like, that's a nice one to just slide in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's complicated, but I do know the trucking stuff has something to do with it too, because there was already problems with truckers. They kind of abandoned California.
This is what it looked like 2 years ago. This is a visualization of like the data they use on a map.
So we're watching trucks
just
or ships come in.
Ships, there's
just
like
a
maybe
couple
10.
ships. This is 2019.
And this is last week.
Why are there so many?
Because they're all stuck.
This is why.
Oh, that's why?
Yeah.
Because they're stuck?
Yeah, they're all floating around out here waiting to find space to come into there to go wait, and they can kind of get in there. Like he said, if there's only 7 out of hundreds of cranes emptying them, then they're waiting.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
And that's why you can't buy toys.
And it's also affecting small businesses.
Yeah.
It's just
so the point here is they're blaming Pete Buttigieg for this. And isn't it women that are supposed to take leave when there's a kid born, not the men? Now, interestingly, Spotify, for which, Joe Rogan now licenses his show, works for Spotify, use whatever term you want. They give 6 months of leave regardless of gender. Which is interesting. The other thing about this, actually, let's look at one more clip because I have some other thoughts, but they're relevant to this next part.
I'm questioning who do you believe should pay for something like that?
I don't know, but if I was an employer and I had a guy who worked for me, who wanted to take 3 months off because his wife gave birth, I'd be like, "What the are you talking about, Mike?"
Even to support his wife?
Did you give birth? To support his wife, I pay him for free. Do you understand that this is kind of most people, when this happens, if they make enough money, the wife will not work and the father will work.
Right.
Now, that might be plausible if the man makes more money. I have friends where the wife is a doctor and makes more money. I have friends where the wife is a lawyer and makes more money. And it really doesn't make sense what Joe Rogan is actually saying. And so even that already is based on this is just basically, it's a suicide. When you assume, you guys know the thing, okay? All right.
And then the wife takes care of the child. And this is normal.
Yeah.
And then
normal. What does that mean? These are such loaded terms. And unfortunately, this was not, I think if someone else was speaking to Joe Rogan about this, you could say, what do you mean normal? Do you mean it's historically typical based on something that started during an era where often women didn't work at all and were less educated than men, which has been completely reversed at this point in time? It's this very kind of like 1950s thinking that's not really relevant today.
the dad provides support when he comes home. If you're saying that the man and the woman should both get like 3 months off, this is a new thing.
Yeah.
Right?
New isn't bad. Now, like, that's also fallacious. Continuing to do something the way it used to be done is not an argument. The fact that it used to be a different way is not actually an argument.
It's not new in Europe, but
We're not in Europe. This is better.
Okay. And so then we add in this idea of, in Europe, the men are feminized. They're sissy men. Here in the United States, we're manly. So it's like they're hitting all the different tropes here. Now, I want to introduce a different kind of question into this. There's this movement. They're called men's rights activists. Now, there are people who believe some of the things men's rights activists believe, and they're not actually men's rights activists. I think it's important to say they just kind of gravitate towards the ideology in some areas. But there's this whole movement, which is about complaining women get preferential treatment on everything in the United States. Men get the shaft. When it comes to divorce, men get the shaft and women get preferential treatment. When it comes to police interactions around domestic violence, women get preferential treatment and men get the shaft. All this different stuff. You would think that they would be saying, hey, you know what? This is great. Women have gotten the preferential treatment on maternity leave at all or paid maternity leave. Now we're equalizing it. The men aren't going to get the shaft anymore. But that's not the perspective of many of those very same people. So it's all stereotypical tropes. The Europeans as the sissy girly men. Real men don't need time off in the U.S. I'm going to go to work and then I'll come home and then I'll hold the baby or whatever. It's just very antiquated stuff. And then the other thing, again, the context of blaming Pete Buttigieg, country of 330 million people, the idea that everything depends on one guy who's home with his kids. These issues started under Trump. No one blamed Transportation Secretary under Trump, Elaine Chao. It's pathetic. Last possible angle. Is it possible that there are people that are worked up about this whose dads weren't around when they were kids? Their dads didn't have any paternity leave, never mind paid paternity leave. And they're transferring that into the same type of thing we're seeing with student loans. Listen, I had to pay my student loans, so we shouldn't forgive them for anybody. Listen, my dad wasn't around when I was a kid, so there shouldn't be paternity leave now. Is there maybe that psychological element that's affecting some people's view on this as well? I'm not talking about Joe Rogan. I have no idea his family history. These are general questions that I have. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. If you follow me on social media, you know I love growing my own food in my backyard garden, and our sponsor, Lettuce Grow, has made growing food at home simpler than ever. The Lettuce Grow Farm Stand is a vertical stand that can be inside or outside, where you can grow over 200 varieties of fruits and vegetables. The farm stand waters and fertilizes itself. It does all the work for you. You can grow up to 36 plants at a time. Lettuce Grow sends you the seedlings, and then your food is ready to eat in 4 to 6 weeks. I've had a great experience with the Lettuce Grow Farm Stand. I've been growing delicious tomatoes, strawberries, eggplant. It only takes up 4 square feet, fits anywhere. I can move it around. Very, very easy. Growing your own food is so rewarding. Lettuce Grow makes it easy for anyone, and Lettuce Grow is giving my audience $50 off the farm stand. Just go to lettucegrow.com/Pacman and use the code Pacman. The link is down below.